Yeah.
Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Franchise Advisory Board, where we bring in experts from around the industry and areas of expertise to give us actionable insights that we can use to build memorable, lasting, thriving franchise brands. I've got a unique guest with me today here, guys. I've got Todd Anthony. He's the partner and creative director, or the executive creative director at Pinwheel Agency, which is an elite creative agency that helps brands get their stories right and gets their brands out there. But Todd's got a really interesting background because he had 20 years of experience working with brands, connecting with customers. He's worked with hundreds of brands in his experience working with. If you know anything about marketing and high level agencies, he's had stints at groups like Ogilvy, JWT, Y&R, client side stints at like Yahoo, CBS Interactive. So Todd's had this really cool experience helping brands figure out what's their story, what's their brand, how do they go to market to connect with customers. And in franchising, we see a lot of this where there's a desperate need. In fact, I know of a brand who hasn't announced it yet, but they've got a really good rebrand coming because the old brand was so tired and gross and weird and not good. But even so, like I heard from the brand president that they're getting so much resistance from the franchise owners to make a change. So anyway, this is a real area of need in the space. So I wanted Todd to join us. Todd, tell us a little bit more about you. Tell us just a little bit more about Pinwheel Agency, and then we're going to jump into our topic, which is how do you create vibrant and great brands that can really help your company to scale. So over to you, Todd. Tell us a bit more about you and your agency.
Sure. You did a great job sort of summing me up. It's hard to follow that, but so I come from the strategy side originally and made the jump over to the creative side, but I'm sort of a hybrid, sort of creative strategy, you know, whatever. Um, Jackalope.
Yeah.
I've run Pinwheel I've been running it since 2014. We help brands sort of get their story straight and then get their story out into the world. And a lot of times that translates to content. So we do quite a bit of content for different brands.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and you're going to fit right in because everybody in franchising needs to figure out their brand story first. In fact, I
Mhm.
won't say the brand, but often young brands that come into franchising, they've got really terrible brand names, right?
Mhm.
And branding and logos and color schemas and the list goes on. So today we're going to talk about creating brands that make you stand out. But why does this even matter? Can we like level set on the basics? Like, who gives a crap if you got a good brand? Does it even matter today? Does AI care if you have a good brand? Like, because everyone's just learning stuff from ChatGPT now. These are the naysayers, right? Help us
Mhm.
understand, like, why does it still matter to have a really strong brand?
Yeah, I mean, to that, I would say, doesn't matter if people like you. I mean, that that's and I would say it absolutely matters if people like you or not. And your brand is sort of it's the group of, I always like to say it's a pattern. So it is the pattern that you're putting out into the world. So if you don't really care about brand, chances are the pattern that you're putting out to the world is it's cold, calculated, risk averse, profit driven, like all the things that people kind of don't like. So I would say your brand is extremely important in getting people to like you and getting people to remember you. So think about the difference between um, I don't know what airline would be the most functionally unbranded airline there is, but imagine what that would be, and then imagine, Virgin Airlines, who's actually no longer in business, but they were a fantastic airline back when they
Mhm.
were operating.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I would say if you want people to like you, you need to care about your brand.
Yeah,
And
totally agree.
yeah,
It's funny. Can I go through a fun thought exercise with you on
please.
this? Like to just accentuate the point. What's the first thing that comes to your mind, Todd, when I say Quiznos?
Ranch dressing.
Yeah, they had the best ranch, that creamy Caesar ranch. Okay. In the franchise industry, when people are thinking about Quiznos, they're like, oh, uh-oh, like meltdown, uh-oh. But they've actually bounced back. I'm glad. I really want a chicken carbonara sandwich, so I hope they build one near me again.
Uh-huh.
What do you think of when you think of Toys R Us?
Uh, Giraffe.
Right?
Jeffrey.
Joey
Jeffrey.
or whatever that
Yeah.
guy's name was.
It was
Yeah.
Jeffrey.
I
Yeah.
think of like in my mind, I'm like, oh, like kind of a tired old
Hmm.
cinder block store that has lots of toys. But
Yeah.
when I was a kid, boy, that was the place to go. But
Oh my God, yes.
yeah.
It was
Uh,
fantastic.
yeah, what's a brand that you've had an incredible brand experience with that you like, it makes you happy when you think about the brand?
Oh boy. Let me think. Um, hmm. Why can't I think of brand? I don't know.
Irony, right? How about like Chick?
Let's go with Apple.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I've had good and bad experiences, but mostly good. And I'm fond of the brand.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and mostly it's their approach to design. So thinking about the things that I don't even notice, um, that's amazing. That's awesome.
yeah. How do you feel about, let's talk about like Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A fried chicken sandwich is, one of the best things on earth, I think,
Mhm.
essentially.
Yeah.
I love it. But I also think of cows. I think
Mhm.
of the, famous campaign where they had cows up on billboards, sort of eat more chicken was the,
Mhm.
in cow scrawl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's their own font, cow. Yeah, and how do you compare that brand in your mind versus McDonald's?
Oh, I hate McDonald's.
Okay.
I think McDonald's and I think basically a meat soup.
Hmm.
I think of the factory. I think of the production of, sort of synthetic foods, basically. That's what I think of.
Yeah. And this is interesting because like, as we start thinking about branding, right? Like let's talk about painting franchises or home or any home service or other
Yeah.
category, right?
Right.
Like why is it so critical? Like, McDonald's can't undo that, right? They became the big boy, and then there were all these exposés about the chemicals in their food and the fake meats and all that stuff, right? And it's like it's hard for them to manage that. But so why does if I'm a franchise in a growing brand, why do I need to invest in my brand early? How do I establish a brand? Why does anyone care about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing, I mean, first of all, it goes back to what I was saying before, which is you're going to have a brand either way.
Mhm. Yeah.
I would say that it's especially important when you're first starting out as a franchise owner, that you want to establish how you're different in the marketplace, and so that becomes the sort of cornerstone of your brand. And how do you stand out? And differentiating is one of the hardest things to do when you first get into a particular business. So let's say you're starting a deli franchise, right?
Hmm.
Uh, there are 17 delis within a 4 mile radius of my house right now. So why would I go to your deli? Like, what is it about your deli that makes it different? And maybe you have the biggest sandwiches for the least amount of money. Like, that's a good reason. Or maybe you're the only one that uses local ingredients, and I really do care about my health and so forth. So you think about what your audience in your area cares about, and then you figure out how to differentiate in that way.
Yeah. Let's pause there for a second because you said something important. Let's go to the example of the deli, right? So I've
Mhm.
got the biggest sandwiches for the least amount of money.
Yeah.
But let's say my target demographic is the social elite, the higher echelons
Hmm.
of the earning spectrum. Does
Hmm.
that, I mean, this is coming back to why brands are important. Does that resonate? If I'm driving my Maserati around town
Yeah.
or whatever, do I care how much I'm spending on a sandwich? And do I want the biggest sandwich? Is that what
Hmm.
I care about, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I would say that that would be a weird audience to go after as a deli owner.
right?
I'm not
Yeah.
sure how I would differentiate in a way that would really speak to the Maserati owners near me. But you could theoretically say you have the most expensive, but also potentially the most elaborate sandwiches.
Mhm.
Like, you could differentiate in a way that's sort of high culinary. Like, maybe Maserati owners are also more inclined to eat at fancy restaurants that have complicated menu items that are, you know, really pretty awesome, but
Mhm.
also very hard to make.
Yeah.
Um,
Unique.
so It's
Yeah.
possible.
And also maybe this is where I mean branding has so much to do with your demographic, right? I mean,
Everything.
you got to start with your target in mind. I'm still in your thunder just a little bit here,
No, no, absolutely.
but if your brand is wrong, I guess that's the whole point I'm trying to make. If your brand is wrong
Right.
and you're gonna what's the net result? Like what happens to the business success rate when their brand is wrong?
I would say it goes back to that example that you brought up earlier, which is that there's a big franchise owner that is rebranding. And the reason that they're rebranding is probably because they stopped being meaningful to the audience, or that the way that they were differentiating in the marketplace was less interesting to the audience they were trying to reach.
Mhm.
And so, over time, their brand just sort of starts going like this. And at some point, they notice that, and they're like, "Well, we have to turn this around. How do we do that? How do we become more meaningful to our audience?" And
Mhm.
that goes to
Mhm.
the brand DNA. So we have to
Yeah.
start from the audience again and say, what do they care about at this point?
Yeah.
And how do we differentiate in that way, but also in a way that's, likable, entertaining, gets attention, etc. So,
Yeah, and how do we do that, right? So when I really want to talk about what makes a good and a bad brand, right? Uh,
mhm,
how do you know? Like, how do you know if you have bad branding? You started to kind of go into, but let's like encapsulate that for a minute.
mhm.
What are the signs you've got a bad brand or a brand that needs a refresh?
That is a good question. I mean, a lot of times yeah, it makes sense to do research and audience research and to really see how your brand is resonating with your audience. Nowadays, with AI, you can do some of that actually using that tool.
Mhm.
We created a brand health report, which basically can go out and get the signals in the marketplace and reflect back to you how you're being perceived in the marketplace. So everything from awareness score to brand affinity score to how you are differentiated against your competition, overall sort of audience sentiment towards your brand, things like that. So you kind of want to be able to sort of read the signals from the marketplace, read them back, and see, you know, is that resonating? Does that answer your question at all?
No, no, absolutely. Yeah. So it has to start with data. And there are also like I'd say there are things that I observe about brands where I'm like, that doesn't align. Like oh, here's a great example.
Yeah.
So years ago, Two Maids and a Mop got acquired by HFC.
Mm,
And Pink brand had an actual like a mop in the design. Like it was clever.
mm,
You could tell the brand was designed quite a while ago. It was busy. It wasn't as flat. And
mm,
also the name of the company, Two Maids and a Mop.
mm,
Uh,
mm-hmm,
it wasn't like sexy, right? It didn't and their audience, right? They're going after, you know, upper income, dual working parents, single, upper income, single family. Like they've got this audience, right? That they want to consume their brand,
mm-hmm.
but having a mop in the brand did not align with
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah.
And
I think that's a
go ahead.
great example, Dave. Actually, because when they started out, they two maids and a mop sounded affordable. It sounded scrappy. It sounded like these women had moxie,
Mhm. Yeah.
and it was projecting that sort of we're just a small little operation, but they grew into a franchise and went after a different demographic at that point. They wanted to reach, more wealthy homes and, buyers. And that that's different than the buyer that's going to try to hire you because you're just a couple of maids and a mop.
Mhm.
So you have to reconsider what your audience finds valuable, how they perceive, your name in the marketplace and your branding, and really think, do we have to maybe reinvest in the brand foundation and
Yeah.
build something that is more aligned with our overall market strategy?
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point there that, and this happens a lot with brands. Brands will have as they grow and mature,
Mm.
their focus shifts a little bit. And I'm thinking about now painting franchises. So like,
Yeah.
almost every painting franchise I know, and I work with lots of them, almost all of them started working on commercial painting jobs.
Hmm.
And which is interesting because a few years ago, maybe 3, 4 years ago, there were like two out of the 40 that were working on commercial. Everybody else is like, well, if one comes my way, maybe I'll take it, but they weren't chasing it. Now
Hmm.
they're all chasing it.
Hmm.
So, but if your brand was designed to go after a specific target demographic, like let's say you wanted to focus on mid-market painting projects. So you were a cost leader, you're an effective cost leader
Hmm.
for residential painting.
Hmm.
Well, how does your brand story have to change when your target demographic and your target business changes?
Yeah. I mean, you might have a name that can withstand that kind of a shift, but a lot of your buyer is completely different at that point. Like you are going after contractors, you're going after what are you? Let me think. If you're going after commercial, you're going after facilities managers, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, you know, what are their main concerns? What do they think about? What are the what keeps them up at night? How do they think about the quality of the painting on their buildings? Like all
Hmm.
of those things are totally different than a homeowner. So yeah, you have to kind of rebuild at that point, I think. Otherwise, you risk not connecting with the people that you want to like you.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, man. And I see it, and also brands are like, look, we don't want to be the low cost leader. We want to move up market and provide a higher end service.
Mm, right.
That's a very different brand image, right? And a
Yep.
very different brand story
Yep.
than maybe where they started, which was, hey, I just want every project I can get. Let's go get anything we can. We're the fastest. We're
Yeah.
whatever, right? That's very different to what the
Yeah.
consumers are looking for if you start moving up market.
Yeah, I mean, you can take the brand that you have and evolve it. You can
Mhm.
evolve it to something that's a little bit more sophisticated. You change the way that you're telling your story on the website. You change the imagery. Maybe you even change your colors and your fonts and so forth. But you can also evolve the story. Like we used to be for residential, and what we learned from that was that quality is everything. Quality is everything, and we bring that to every commercial project.
Mhm.
Whatever it is. You can definitely work with what you've got. I'm not saying you have to like throw everything out every time your market changes.
Yeah, valid. And you don't want to, right? Because what happens when you offend your love group? If you're not familiar with it, like the love group is like these are your diehard fans of your brand, right? I mean, all you got to do is just ask what happened to Budweiser when they made the fateful mistake of going crazy woke with a
Yeah.
brand that was historically like, football sponsorships and like the Bras having a barbecue and a brat, right? Like what happened when they violated that
Yeah.
brand story and their brand followers?
It didn't go particularly well. And so I do think that when you go after new audiences, you definitely need to keep your loyal fans in mind, especially if you're as storied a brand as Budweiser, as sort of you're a fixture in the marketplace at that point. So there are people that are keeping you afloat. You need to pay attention to those people as well when you go after new audiences. So don't forget them.
Yeah, don't forget because they're paying your bills, right?
They really are. Yeah. I mean, it's okay to go after new audiences, but you
Mhm.
need to do it in a way that's not going to alienate the old.
Yeah,
So,
what are some best practices there? Because I think there are a lot of brands that are doing that right now. Markets are soft. People are trying to expand what the services they offer to increase the revenue potential,
mhm.
cross-sell, upsell, resell new things. But how can brands be meticulous or be thoughtful about that so that they don't pull Budweiser? It's sad that they've become that like this metaphor of whoopsies, but they're the new ones. 10 years from now, somebody else will do something idiotic. But
Right.
yeah, how do you approach that with caution, but also with savvy?
Mm. Well, it's a challenge because you want to have a very sharp point on your message, on your story,
Hmm.
and so you don't want to get too diffuse in the way that you're projecting yourself out there. So how many audiences you need to sort of pick your primary audience, and maybe it's an amalgamation of audiences so that you create like a profile of the audience that you care about, and you build the brand around it. So I don't know, maybe let's see if we had an example of um, can you think of an example of a brand that has ambitions to expand their audience?
Oh, well, let's just talk about like we could pick a food brand. We've done a couple of home service type brands. Actually, let's talk about dogs. Let's talk about pets. That's a hot area.
Yeah.
So, what about the brand that does pet sitting
Mhm.
that decides they want to pick up poop scooping? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of a crappy topic. Sorry about that, but
Sorry, was that pun intended?
it was. Yes, yes. Carry on, carry on.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that case, you're talking to sort of the same audience about two different services, and you are talking, you're telling a different story about the new service.
Hmm.
But hopefully there's a way to tie that new service, the story around that new service, into your overall brand story. So, is there a foundational element from your core brand story that does potentially tie to picking up dog shit?
Hmm.
I hope I can say that
Yeah,
coherent.
carry on. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. And you know that idea that you're maybe caring for the whole pet. I don't know. I honestly don't know what you would do there, but
Yeah, but I could see a couple paths. Like if your brand is all about caring for the pet, right? Like, hey, we're here to make sure that Rufus gets cared for. He's not lonely. He gets his exercise. And we're here to make sure he doesn't step on his own poop in the yard. We want him to run free in the yard, right? Like,
I'm
I
free.
guess if we're talking about like how do you play, like I know we're playing like ad
Yeah.
libs here a little bit with concepts, but like if you've got your core audience, I'm marketing to 28 to 35-year-old young couples that
Yeah.
have pets but the couples are busy, but they care about their pet. Like you start to get narrow in on these persona psychographics, demographics. Well, the message that's resonating right now about your dog sitting service,
Mhm.
then like you were saying, and I'm just recapping now,
Yeah.
you tie the ancillary service or value to what was already resonating in the first place. So
Right.
how does this service affect Rufus the dog, right? Our core avatar.
Yeah.
And then now your marketing will synergize with your existing audience, and it might also appeal to some
Yeah.
people on the fringe that you're trying to expand out into that don't need the sitting, but they just don't want to clean up the poop anymore.
Yeah. And then you can start thinking about how these things might expand further. So if you're starting to develop a story around the holistic care of an animal, what are some other aspects of that? Maybe it's dog training, or dog psychology, or I don't know all the different things that are offered to pet owners exactly, but you could develop a more holistic solution, and then you have a built-in group of people who come to you already. You can just expand within that group, and that's kind of what we do as an agency. We tend to sell our clients on other things that we do that
Mhm.
they had originally thought of to do. So
That's a great example, though, because if you've done your work, you talked about this initially being a strategist and a creative guy, but coming from the strategy side, like the strategy has to drive the creative, it has to drive the brand. If it
mhm,
doesn't, you're going to flop, or you'll just get lucky at some point. But
mhm,
um, if you're in that case, you already know, hey, this is our persona. These are the current buyers. These are the people our messaging is resonating with. You can also flip the script and then ask the question, what else are they looking for?
yep,
What else are they spending money on for Rufus the dog, right?
exactly,
And then you start to find those ancillary services you bolt onto the business. So sometimes the avatar and the marketing strategy can actually it can inform the overall business strategy arc.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. You asked a question earlier, actually, that I wanted to go back to a little bit.
Please.
The idea of brand governance, like how do you keep a brand on track? How do you
Hmm.
make sure that the brand is being consistent? And the answer to that is really in the sort of brand story guide, the brand voice guide, the brand identity guides, and those things and how they are rolled out to a company and how they are actionalized, how they are taught to people, and the habits that you help them develop around that stuff, that becomes the governance system, and it becomes essentially the consistency mechanism that is so important for a brand to develop that pattern that I talked
Hmm.
about earlier. Um, and if it doesn't stay consistent, then what happens is that people stop trusting your brand because it's coming across in multiple different ways. So just as we, like the people that we know to have a consistent pattern of behavior, like if they start acting like wackaloons, then we stop feeling like we know who they are,
Yeah.
you know? So the
No,
same thing can
good
happen with
point.
a brand.
That's a very, very good point. And this is, I'd say every franchise brand, their C-suite marketing team, this is a really key aspect of what they're trying to do, right? They really want to have a consistent experience across locations. We talked about Chick-fil-A
Yeah.
as an example, but I'm going to bring it up. We went on a road trip a couple years ago, several years ago now, actually, and we ended up getting sick from a family member
Mm-hmm.
about 3,000 miles from home.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually drove because we had friends and family we stopped to see all along the way out to Outer Banks, North Carolina. But we felt sick, but we needed to eat on the way home, and we had to drive, and it was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
But we were like, everyone's like, let's just go to Chick-fil-A and get their chicken noodle soup. And like, so across the country, we
Mm-hmm.
stopped at every Chick-fil-A for like a couple meals a day. It was ridiculous,
Mm-hmm.
but what I see personally, what I've seen is you walk into one, it's the same everywhere. The place that might look a little different, but
Mm-hmm.
the restaurant is going to give you the exact same experience every single time. It's going to be consistent and fast and high quality. And they're going to treat you politely. It's going to be clean. The restrooms are clean. It's like a Maverick out here in the West. They've got these gas stations, the Mavericks. Their
Mm-hmm.
key differentiator they decided to use as their strategic marketing and everything is they just have the cleanest and nicest restrooms.
Awesome.
So guess who wants to stop?
Yeah.
Mom, the
Yeah.
sisters,
Yeah.
grandma. Guess who wants
Mm-hmm.
to stop? The boys are like, that's fine. I don't
Yeah.
have to sit down to do that.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's created this clean, nice convenience store chain,
Right.
and they're buying everybody out around here. Like they're expanding like crazy. They're doing a great job, but it doesn't feel like I'm stepping into the old Flying J. It feels different, right? So it just creates this brand experience that now I want to keep going back, but they know who they're marketing to, right?
Yeah, that is just amazing, Dave. The fact that a gas station can focus on one thing, and it's the bathroom. I used to work at a gas station when I was 17 years old, and I remember cleaning that bathroom. It was no fun, I can tell you. Like people treat gas station bathrooms not very well, I'll tell you that. And able to like gobble up other gas stations because they're doing so well on that one differentiator is just it's a real testament to leaning into something that your audience cares about and really going all the way,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, no,
coming
absolutely.
for it. But what you were talking about before with the Chick-fil-A, I mean, it's trust is what you're describing. It's trust, it's comfort in know we like knowing what we can expect and having those expectations met every time. So every time I go to a Chick-fil-A, I know that the fried chicken sandwich is gonna be fire because it's always fire,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and whether we're talking food or home service or whatever, right? This concept of a brand. Now we're talking about the deliverable of the brand, right? The
Yeah,
the food in our hand and in our mouth, or the
yeah.
wall with the paint on it, or the beautiful floors, or the windows, or the dog
Hmm.
that got Rufus that just got taken care of.
Hmm.
How do you now? How would you advise a brand? Let's say that they are they've heard what we're saying. They feel like their brand's a little tired. The designs are not in alignment with what people would expect in a current modern brand.
Mhm.
There are times where maybe that's what you want, like the Cracker Barrel, right? Maybe you
Yeah,
do want to keep it kind of a hokey old brand because that's what people remember and that resonates with your audience.
right.
But let's say you've identified that your brand needs a refresh. How do you like where do you start? Like where do you even start? In fact, maybe we start with how do you know when your brand needs a refresh? Give us some advice on that, and then we'll talk about how do you do it next.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of goes back to what I was saying before, and just sort of seeing the numbers go down and doing some research into what's making that happen, and then noticing that your audience is not resonating as much with your brand, and potentially, what the song that you're singing is tired and
Mhm.
no longer one that people want to be played on the radio anymore. You know,
Yeah.
sort of like for me, it was the Pretenders because back when I was coming up, we had this one radio station that played the Pretenders all the time, and I didn't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but it could be that. And then when it comes time to do the rebrand, you really start again, you start with the audience. I keep going back to it, but that is, and I probably sound like I'm repeating myself, but it's it's really going back and doing a deep dive into like what do they care about. We have this one client, and this isn't a rebrand, but it's sort of a testament to why audience is so important. They had this exercise bike that was powered by gaming, essentially. So
Mhm.
the harder you pedal, the more game time you got, and it had a screen on there, just like a Peloton, but you were playing a game,
Hmm.
had controls and stuff like that. And so, what kind of an audience cares about that? It's an audience that has a difficult relationship with exercise. They want to be healthy, they want to exercise, but they find it boring. And
Mhm.
they find a lot of times that the people in the exercise industry are all about discipline and hard work and, pain and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
That just is it's a big turnoff for a whole bunch of people. So, going back to the audience, think about that as a fitness brand. Like, what about all those people that are not being served by the industry right now? And
Yeah.
is that a potential opportunity for you?
Yeah.
Or look at the audience that you've been like that you've been servicing, and how have they changed? What are some ways that your brand was um, not appealing to them?
Mhm.
Um, what are some missed opportunities that for example, Huggies. Huggies is it's a diaper brand. We all
Yeah.
know and love Huggies. They noticed that their audience, there was a gap in what they were offering. It wasn't really about the brand; it was more about the product. But
Mhm.
the story sort of holds. There was kids who were graduating from diapers to underwear, and then there were kids who had really sort of outgrown diapers, and were a little self-conscious, but they hadn't quite graduated to underwear yet.
Mhm.
And so Huggies was like, what if we created this in-between product? So they created pull-ups,
Mhm.
and it's a great way to sort of be more relevant to your audience. Uh, Again, it's a product thing, but the same holds true for when you go and do your rebrand. Think about what you've been failing to say.
Yeah. It's a great way to look at it. Well, we're gonna have to get together another time and talk about how do you do a rebrand or a brand refresh.
Yeah.
Because we'll have to end on that note, but it's an interesting place to stop because brands today are looking for ways to capture more revenue as the markets soften.
Mhm.
And that's a perfect example of like their brand, their audience, right? When you
Mhm.
listen to the audience, then you see the gap in the market, then you can create a product or a service that fills the need. This is
Hmm.
a great example of what you talked about before about your audience. Like when you know your audience and you're dialed into what they need, then they'll help guide you toward additional revenue, right? And or brand changes that are necessary so you continue to resonate. So,
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah, I think also just really quickly in closing, I think a lot of people assume they know their audience when they don't necessarily. Like, what if you were to, bring some people in and actually maybe offer them some free whatever you sell and, pick their brains a little bit instead of thinking, well, I work with my customers every day, so I know my customer. Well, maybe you do, but maybe you don't know the things they're not saying or, the things they're not dealing with. And if you were to have a conversation about the intersection between them and your product or what you sell, um, you might learn something
mhm.
valuable.
Yeah, valid point. It's really easy to do this nowadays, right? Like you used to have big tools and expensive things to do a little market research. Now you can just do a Google form or do a quick Survey Monkey or something, right? You can gather data
Yeah.
pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I appreciate that. That's a great way to end.
Yeah.
Todd, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, because like, you know what, I like Todd. I like the way he's talking about marketing and branding and audience, and I feel like I need some help from someone who's got his background doing this for so long. How could somebody reach out to you? What's the best way?
Well, our website is pinwheelagency.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Todd Anthony, creative director, easy to find there. And those are probably the best ways. And my email is todd@pinwheelagency.com. So you can always email me.
Awesome. Todd,
Yeah.
thanks for making yourself accessible and for
Hey,
sharing
Dave.
some insight with us today.
Thanks. That was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.